In part 1 of this tutorial, we created skyscrapers with the polygon lasso tool, filled them with a colour of a distant building, and used the awesome darken blending mode to fit them into the city without us having to cut out the bottoms of the buildings. In this video, we will add other details using images and learn to instantly remove their dark backgrounds using the powerful screen blending mode. Now let's add some special effects like windows and fog. To do this, go to your source images folder in the description below and download the matrix code, the planets, and the cloud here as well. To put windows on a building, simply drag in your matrix code from your downloads into your image and do add current. Your matrix code will now appear. You can rotate it sideways to have your windows going this way, or you can keep it vertical if that's what you're going for. I'm just going to rotate mine this way and scale it down quite a lot. You may need to stack several images together, but we should just about be able to get away with this. Make sure that the top of the image matches the top of the building like this. And if you have any perspective added to your buildings like I have, then you'll need to go to Edit, Free Distort, and just drag one of the corners down until the top of the image matches the angle of the building that you've got in there, so that the windows run parallel. The bottom of any building windows that you've got will be flat like this. Hit enter on the keyboard to accept what you've done. You can now hit the three dots by this layer and change the blend mode to screen, and you can now see through the dark areas of the image, which is great. Feel free to scale it down as needed. You'll now need to delete parts of this image so that it doesn't go off into the sky. Go back to your polygon lasso tool and do dot to dot around here like this to cut off anything that you want, and then go around the outside of the entire image, double click and press delete. Just to make it a little bit more futuristic, you may want to do something interesting on the other side as well, and trim that off by completing the shape on the outside and hit delete. These windows look far too vibrant, and also they're covering over some of the buildings in the foreground. The best thing to do is go to your eraser tool and simply make the brush size about 40 if it isn't already, and change the opacity down to about 30 or 40% like I have here. And then just drag a few times in certain areas. The more you drag, the less visible it will be. So I'm just kind of fading out the bottom of the windows here by clicking and dragging multiple times over this. Now that the bottom's faded out into the city, into the smog down there, I'll go to the three dots for my windows layer and adjust the transparency down quite a lot. If you feel that you'd rather have more of the light off on your building, then you can do this. Make sure you're on the correct layer and go to Adjustment, Curves, double click down here and drag the darker colors so that they're darker, and then double click here and drag the lighter colors so that they're lighter. I recommend that only the older students have a go at this, but this will then turn some of the windows off on your building. The more you do it, the more saturated the remaining colors will look, but don't worry, we can always desaturate them later as well. Something like this looks quite good. I'll hit apply. To change the saturation or color of these windows, go to Adjustment, Hue and Saturation. You can even change the color to green or yellow, whatever you want. I like them as blue. And you can then adjust the saturation as needed to make them more or less blue, like that. I'm going to hit apply. It's subtle, but I think it works well. If you want to add any glowing lights to your buildings, it's best to do this on a brand new layer by clicking on the empty plus button and choosing empty. Going to your paint brush, and to create a light, simply choose your color for the light. I'm going to choose a red light by dragging my rainbow color up here, choosing the color red, hitting OK, and making the size of my brush quite small. I'm going to make the size of my brush about 15 or 20. I will also change the softness up to 100% as well. I'll click at the top of one of the antenna and you've got yourself a red dot. You can then change the color to pure white and change the size of your brush down to 10 and click in the middle of that dot so that now the middle of it's pure white. You can double click if you want to make it more intense like this. If you rename this layer by clicking on the three dots and just calling it light, you can then duplicate the layer for anywhere else where you need it to save you doing that step again by clicking on the three dots and doing duplicate layer like this, and then you can place it anywhere else. To copy and paste these lights even more quickly, make sure you're on the layer with the correct light on it like this one, and then go to your selection tool, drag a selection box over your light like this and do Ctrl C or edit copy. Then you can deselect by clicking away or doing select, deselect pixels and going back to your move tool. Then you can do Control V or edit paste to paste your light. It will appear in the middle of your screen wherever your screen is. It may be a good idea to put some of these lights on the corners of your building like this. Some of them may be blinking, so you don't need it everywhere. And sometimes these buildings have the lights down the side as well. You can of course adjust the scale or the opacity of the lights by clicking the three dots and dragging the transparency down if you want them to be less insane. Another finishing touch that you can do is to add these highlights on certain areas of your building. To do this, simply make another new layer with the plus button just beneath your layers, choose empty. Go back to your line tool in your shapes tool over here and make sure it's line. Set the color to something quite bright. Notice on some of the buildings down here that they have parts of them that are reflecting something. You can click on your top color and try to color pick one of these lighter areas like this. Something like this would work well, or something even like this would work well if you want to as well. Choose OK. I'm making the stroke of my line only 1, and you can then drag lines maybe on the edge of your windows, for example. It can be for anything, but it will look good if it's on the edge of the windows like this. You'll need to zoom in close to make sure that you start the new line from where the previous one that you just drew ended. Any lines that are facing upwards like this may be more exposed to the light, so could be brighter. The next step with this is to simply use the eraser tool. Remember the eraser tool set to about 40 and opacity set to about 40, and you can then just kind of paint, click, 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 and paint over the top like this, just to fade the lines away, so you can't really see a sharp point at where they begin like that. Same at the bottom. I'm just going to click and drag up, click and drag up, click and drag up, just to sort of fade away the line as it goes down there, just to make it look like it's a shine or a reflection rather than an actual neon light, which would also look cool. Now we're going to add the smoke into the scene by going to the downloads folder on your computer, and you can then drag in the cloud PNG over into Pixlr like this and let go and do add current. A giant cloud will then appear in your scene. It's far too pale and white like that, so we can go to adjustment, hue and saturation. This time we're going to tick the box for colorize down here, and we're going to drag the hue like this until it starts to match the image. So we're going for something that's kind of orange. It will be far too intense when you find the color orange, but you can always drag the saturation down like this to suit, or the lightness up like that. So I've dragged mine to -160 for hue, -55 for saturation, and about 30 for lightness, and then hit apply. I'm setting my blend mode to overlay like this, and you can see that it's gotten really quite intense, which looks kind of cool. But if you want to adjust the colors like I will, you can go back to adjustment, hue and saturation, and desaturate that so it's far less intense. Something like this now, I've set it to -70-ish. Again, it will look much better. You can then scale it down like this. You may want to fade the bottom of this away by going to your eraser tool again and make the eraser tool much bigger this time, maybe about 300. And then you can just click and drag multiple times at the bottom of the cloud so that you can't really see the bottom. If I move it around now, you can kind of see it fades away like this into your scene. You may need to duplicate the cloud to make sure it covers all of your buildings, or scale it to suit. You now may want to add some planets into the sky. To do this, again, into your downloads folder on your computer, and you should have downloaded some planets. I'm going to drag in this planet here, do add current, and just move it roughly into position. Again, hit the three dots and set the blending mode to screen, and then scale it up to suit. If the planet overlaps a building like it is here, then you could just go to your eraser tool and set the opacity to 100% and rub it out. If you're one of the more advanced students, then you could of course go to your cutout or mask tool and mask it out so that it's future proof. But if you're a younger student, simply go to your eraser tool and rub it out like that. You will see the edges of the image even when you set it to screen, so you can just rub over the edges of those to soften that out. you notice that you'll need to actually set the softness of your brush to 100% and the size of your brush up even further to about 550, and then you can rub it out like this and it looks a lot more natural. Do the same thing with the next planet and add it into your scene. Set the blending mode to screen and make sure you rotate the angle of the planet so that it's facing the sun, just like the planet with the ring on is there. And you can just have it over like that to look like it's even further away, or scale it down as you like. The final thing that I did to add detail to my image was to simply add a bunch of flying cars or spaceships in like this, and some kind of giant energy ball like that. Just make sure you've downloaded the energy ball from the source images and get it dragged in from the downloads folder into your scene and do add current and just scale it down. Don't forget to set the blending mode for this layer to screen like this and scale it down as needed. Now it looks like your city's harnessing the power of its own miniature sun or something like that. Maybe it's a portal to another dimension, but either way it's cool. Now there's an issue here where my spaceship somehow moved and I need to put it back where it came from. I can't click on it anymore because Saturn's in the way. To stop this from happening, if there's a layer in front of a layer like this and you can't click through it, you can click on the 3 dots and click locked. And now you'll be able to click through a planet. This works really well on images like these giant planets where they're set to transparent-ish blend mode like screen, and you want to click through them. You can simply lock them and then click through them to move everything back to where you'd like it to be like this. Same with the smoke down here. You can just click on the 3 dots and set the layer to locked, and then you can move your buildings where you like. For the flying vehicles in the sky, just draw a random shape like this and choose a color from one of your distant buildings like this. Just click on your top color, choose a distant building color, hit OK, and on a brand new empty layer with a plus button, empty, click on your spaceship and fill it in. Please do this on an empty layer so that you can easily move them around later on. And then you can get your select, deselect, or control D, and then move that wherever you like it to be. You could then duplicate it with the 3 dots duplicate layer, move it somewhere else. You could just scale it down because it's a shape that no one recognizes. You could completely spin it around however you want to do it. No one's going to judge. It's going to be such a small detail, but just something in there just to make it look like there's things flying around. And remember to copy and paste quickly a layer. Just drag a selection box over the correct layer and do Control C, Control V. And it's just popped up in the middle of my screen here. And now I can just have a few spaceships like this, Control V, wherever my camera's looking. And now there's a spaceship there. I could do like a little squadron of spaceships like this by Control Ving them in like that. They look a little bit too intense, so I'm just going to lower the opacity on some of those layers and maybe merge them together by clicking on merge down multiple times so that they are on the same layer. And then click on your 3 dots and drag the transparency down as needed. If you want to add a trail behind one of the spaceships, then you've got this smoke image here that you can absolutely use. And just pop that behind the spaceship and set the blending mode again to screen. Make it way smaller and just have that over there like this. You'll need to blend out the edges of the image, and also I'm going to rotate it with this little circle at the top like that, and do E for eraser and change the size of my eraser way down to about 100 or less like this, and just rub out the beginning, the back, and the top edges of the image like that. And of course you could throw in some text if you like as well, but it'd be very faint and pale, but I've got some fonts installed for that. But otherwise I've just messed around here, added a few more spaceships, and that is exactly how I've created this image here with all of the details like this. Hopefully this has now helped you understand a lot of the Pixlr interface, which is obviously very similar to Photoshop 2. So you've now kind of understood the basics of both of these softwares. And you can see that you can actually push them to become quite powerful tools to create concept art from your imagination. I hope this helped.